Hello and welcome to Unboxed, the podcast that dives deep into the world of custom packaging and innovative brand experiences. In each episode, we'll be exploring the latest trends, innovations, and best practices in the design and packing industry, and then taking a look at how they can help businesses like yours to create memorable and impactful brand experiences. I'm your host, Sam Johnston. Let's get started. Hello and welcome to Unboxed, the podcast that dives deep into the world of custom packaging and innovative brand experiences. In each episode, we'll be exploring the latest trends, innovations, and best practices in the design and packaging industry and how they can help businesses like yours to create memorable and impactful brand experiences. I'm your host, Sam Johnston, and in this episode, we'll be talking to Jared Beauchamp, who's the founder of Salce, Arizona's premium small batch hot sauce. Thank you so much for giving the time for our listeners today. It's great to have you here, Jared.
Hey, thanks. Appreciate it, Sam, for having me today.
Yeah, amazing. And if this is your first time listening, we have a format where we run through 5 key questions to get insights from our guests. I'll run through those in a second. If it's your returning time, we'll have it chapters. If you want to jump to that specific question to get Jared's take on those, feel free to do that, and you should be able to do it easily. But the first question starts off with what inspired our guests today to get into their commerce business that they're in, into their having to do packaging, branding, taking products to market, and all that side of things. The second one then will be how do they think custom packaging and the design aspect of packaging can contribute to getting loyal customer bases. The third one will be any success stories or case studies that maybe they've experienced or they've seen out there in the market that are doing this really well. Then we come on to the fourth question, which are what are some of the challenges, some of the pitfalls and roadblocks that entrepreneurs or businesses like yourselves might come across and that you can get ahead of without having to go over them yourself. And the last one is us getting out our crystal ball, taking a look at the future and seeing what sort of trends might be coming up over the next 5 to 10 years. What kind of things might be happening that businesses like yours should be aware of and that you can do today to get ahead of them and get ahead of the curve. Let's go all the way back to the front there with Jared and ask, so what inspired you, Jared, to get into the business you have today, and how did you get your start in the industry?
Yeah, so going way back a couple years ago, like you mentioned, there's a nice little YouTube series called Hot Ones that kind of inspired us. And it started out in the backyard, kind of, making some hot sauce for my 9 to 5, working that out, bringing in some gifts for, coworkers. And, just bringing bottles here and there, and people tried, oh, we love it. Instead of bringing donuts, I was like, oh, let me play around in the backyard grilling. So always loved food, worked in restaurants as I was a kid. So that was kind of the drive there and just kind of mess around. And then a little thing, COVID happened. We all decided it was time to go home and work from home.
Yep.
But my phone rang and said, hey, we need more hot sauce. I'm like, that was just kind of an office gift. And I'm like, okay. And they're like, well, if you ever do sell it, let me know. And then the phone rang again and again and again. And other coworkers wanted more. And I was like, well, that's different. I haven't had a business where coworkers wanted to actually, exchange currency for my goods.
Oh, nice.
So from that journey we started, I said, I need to go find some folks who I don't know that I don't work with and get their opinion and kind of grind it out them. So using my local area, did some testing. And they gave the same feedback. They were inspired. They loved it. They thought it was a great, refreshing take on hot sauce. And I said, okay, well, we might have something here. And then from there, there's a little logistical getting set up of where to actually make the hot sauce in a commercial kitchen and some other logistical concerns. And that's kind of what we started off and running. And ever since, we've been selling here in the local area at Arizona farmers markets and different venues here online, across social media ever since. So we're a couple years in and we're still learning, still grinding, but humble beginnings of just, making some gifts and friends. So that's how we got started in hot sauce. Yeah.
This is so good. More often you look down the aisle and there's so many brands out there to choose from, and they all try to look like they are like a really cool founder created craft brew type brand, and more often than not, they're not, right? They're just kind of churned off a large production line, and some men in suits in an office somewhere have decided this is what people need to have. So to have an actual founder-owned food brand like this kicking off in the market is really exciting to me, and I think that it's such a great opportunity to build a community around a great product, which you've come from that, and now you're taking it out into the world. But I'm right in thinking that outside of this epic new journey you're on, you also have a kind of a career history, and that's in tech, right? As a background.
Correct. Yeah, tech. So my 9 to 5 is in tech today. It was previously in video games. So I made the transition,
Nice.
about 9 years ago, from video games to tech. But yeah, I've been working in the space for good old big tech with a small company called GoDaddy. But yeah, that I oversee some engineering teams, but have a kind of
Nice.
big history there. So.
Love that. And is there a benefit that you've seen, like bringing that tech background into this type of market with the hot sauce? Like, what's the benefits there that you found?
So it's the story of GoDaddy, and GoDaddy is very entrepreneurial driven as well in folks. And so it's one of the things that drew me in before, doing this journey. So me being at GoDaddy, starting this hot sauce company, all kind of intertwines into my
Nice.
kind of DNA. Um, but it gives the same principles that I use even in my job working 9 to 5, or what I see. GoDaddy teaches me a lot, and then I bring something back to the platform as
Yep.
an actual entrepreneur. So I'm, shifting my hats per the day and say, okay, I'm using our own products. Here's how the tech's working for me as a small business, right? Across the board. And
Yep.
we'll get into it, but we've gone through packaging and how does packaging impact shipping? Something a platform like in tech,
Yep.
has a big draw and has to have an understanding. Okay, are you doing your own packaging? Are you drop shipping, right? How's your package tested? Is it in the right kind of box? All those things brands have to figure out, but they work with the tech to take the next mile of it for continuing their brand and story and journey for their business.
That's amazing. And are you running scrums for your sort of your within the other side of your business? Are you transferring that over? Is it bleeding over?
Yeah, again, my journey is that producer, project
Yeah.
manager, engineering manager. I'm a people person, organizer. So absolutely, my wife and I, we have boards set up. I have my own kind of,
Yeah.
Scrum boards. Sometimes it's a Kanban board. I'll throw it up and just have some
Nice.
tasks up there for us. But yeah, absolutely, those project management skills have to translate to keep us organized and keep us on track.
Yeah.
Again, something in tech, we're always changing, shifting, right? Between, you get the lean agile methodology, you get all these different things from tech and learn it. It's like, okay, can I come back and apply it here as well? So yeah, those soft skills for sure too.
Love that. That's amazing. Well, for some of our listeners, some of these people they're entrepreneurs, they're starting, they're taking a brand to market. Maybe they're in their sort of product market fit stage, they're still trying to get it right. And then on the other side of that, we have people that are listening that are in fairly large organizations, that have been doing their sort of product launches and packaging and logistics for a number of years. And they like listening because they get fresh perspectives from people that are coming into the market and, sort of wrestling and wrangling with doing this in a new, cost efficient and unique way. And I think that you're going to bring some real value to both sides of that listenership. So we're going to move on to the second question here, and we're going to come at it from an angle of someone that's actively in the trenches doing this on a day-to-day basis. So how do you think that custom packaging, product brand experiences in general can contribute to creating a loyal customer base? And what are some of the most effective strategies you've seen or done to achieve that?
Yeah, so I think as a consumer packaged good, a CPG, right? Like we exist on a shelf, and being in the food space, it's even more critical. The consumers aren't tasting my food first; they're seeing it. They're not seeing the bottle, they're not seeing the label, they're seeing the package, the custom,
Mm.
right? And that's what draws them in. And again, linking back to COVID, I think even Doug talked about this a little bit on his episode. It's transformed. It's a different ball game now. I didn't have a place. I don't have a shelf, right? We're back into those markets, but that time everything shifted. And so I think the mindset around packaging changed because it wasn't just on a shelf anymore because we didn't have shelves to go look at.
Yep.
And so how do you bring that into your full brand, into everything else with social media, right? To grab that consumer's attention, right? Not, in a normal retail world, you had a few seconds if you're thinking about as a consumer, I'm walking down an aisle of my normal supermarket, right? In that supermarket, each product has a very small subsection of that shelf. Consumer spends 1 to 3 seconds walking past that section. How
Yep.
do you grab their attention? How do once you grab their attention, know you landed of what's inside that box, what it tastes like as a food CPG, right? How do we do that in a very short amount of time? That all comes down to your packaging, right? How do you
Yep.
pull them in and then know the next immediate questions they're going to have? Oh, hey, cool. This is local hot sauce in our case, right? We're seeing a lot of folks being conscious about the ingredients. Do they know what's in it immediately? Can they get that Do they understand that? Do they see that, if you have things like where it's gluten-free, where it's sugar-free,
Yeah.
where it's color and dye free, right? Red 40 is a big thing in the space. All those things. How do we make sure we're getting that, across in a very crafted, careful message to get them after they pick it up to put it in their cart and check out, right? And then you get into the web space and it's even harder. People are scrolling. So you have more of a social media, right? And in our short form videos, how are we grabbing their attention with that same packaging and give them that experience that this is what this brand's about. So I think
Yeah.
that model has shifted and we've had to kind of spread and think about it in multiple avenues. But at the end of the day, to get people to taste what's inside my bottle, I got to get it across in our branding and our packaging. That has to land
So
first,
good.
or they're never going to open it.
Yeah. And in particular with the hot sauce market, if you like, or just the product, compared to something like, if you're buying dish detergent or if you're buying, a brand new toaster, there's a lot of space on that packaging to be able to tell a lot of story and get a lot of information across. Hot sauce, stereotypically, a little bit of a small space to play with.
Yep.
How have you found that kind of really getting concise on your packaging?
Yeah, so you've had to dial in your message, refine it, test it, get it out with folks. Does this make sense? Do I get it back? So even a story from last week, colleague ended up buying, our hot sauce for the very first time. They got it. They're giving me some feedback. And they immediately commented like, hey, I could see it at this grocery store, which is not a chain grocery store. It's a one here in Arizona that's very local. But it had the right, and they immediately hit the mark, right?
Yeah.
So between our branding, our packaging, that's the feedback. Was it on hot sauce? Hey, what do you think about this? Like, oh, I could see it in this grocery store. It's like,
That's
cool.
great.
Got it. But we had that model of where we wanted to be ahead of time to measure how
Yeah.
far are we off on it. But that's the perspective they gave us without even knowing, and just generating that feedback and constantly questioning folks and having that space to do as well is important. Right. Like I've
Yeah.
set up a pretty good network. And like I mentioned, GoDaddy is entrepreneurial first in their own business. So they support us really, really well. So we have a lot of great spaces and rooms for people to kind of give that to us. So finding those is so important to refine that messaging. And then on top of, understanding design and iconography and fonts, what's readable and legible, right? Again, like you said, hot sauce bottles are generally, you don't have a lot of space. You have 3 to 5 inches on a label
Yeah.
or a package. Front and back, and it's like, okay, do I make consolidations to show more of the product? Transparency is big in the space these days. I want to see what's in there.
Yeah.
That reduces your space even more because now, hey, we have to show more of the product, so I got to rely more on the packaging and design. So kind of summarize, it's a refinement of that message, get it out there, get it tested, get feedback, and be open to that criticism to be
Yeah.
able to come back and iterate and know when it's time to iterate and say, okay, let's refine that a little bit more. It's not landing.
Yeah.
And yeah.
That's great. And I think that, when that person sees the packaging and they say, oh, this kind of belongs in this store, I guess they're kind of saying like this, oh, this is that kind of community's hot sauce. This belongs to this group of buyer, this type of person. And how did you go about finding that buyer, that kind of early adopter, or that community that the hot sauce belongs to at the moment? How did you discover that?
It was a targeted audience we saw in the market. With hot sauce particular, the way we looked at it, because we've been fans and connoisseurs. I've loved spicy stuff all my life.
Mhm.
And again, got into it with this very now famous YouTube show, Hot Ones, and understood and saw the market where these exotic peppers beyond our normal store peppers of jalapenos and habaneros that a lot of consumers are very familiar with. And we got into these exotic realms, which just increased the heat.
Yep.
And so when I looked at my local markets, or I looked at, my local farmers market, what people are creating, even, in the early iterations, it was still at that side of it. They're all fighting in the same space. And I saw this kind of gap in the market where we can take the same peppers and the same flavors and expose people to it without all the heat, without, chasing that really high burn, to
Mhm.
enjoy hot sauce and to be food enhancing. And I saw this opportunity. So that was kind of a target marketed audience for us to be in that space,
That's great.
to not chase the uber hot, the exotics, like I said, where everybody else was going, but to exist in their wake because they're pushing the market. That's like, cool, we can ride that wake, let them do it, because that's where all these things like the one chip challenge and these really spicy foods and
Yep.
have come out of, and it's going crazy and gangbusters, which is great to introduce all these folks to the spices, let them drive that and they're finding that space. But we're saying, hey, we're not competing with those guys. We're kind of in that wake behind them a little, to kind of elevate your food, to enjoy it, because we have found a very successful market for that people, hey, there's certain people who like really hot, but there's also people who like spicy but want to enhance their food. They want to bring it up a level, not technically sweat to death or burn your palate off like we talk about. I have those moments. I love it. um, and also from a hot sauce perspective, it seems kind of simple, but with those hotter hot sauces, you use a very little. As a brand, I need you to finish the bottle, so you buy another one. So if you can only use a little at a time, it's going to take you a while to go through 5, 8,
So it's a
10, 12
lifetime
ounce.
bottle,
Exactly, right? And I think a lot of folks can relate to that. If you ever bought hot sauce, you probably have that bottle somewhere in the back of the fridge, and it's
Yeah,
probably half to 3/4 full instead of being used, right? We want to exist in that ketchup, mustard, ranch, salad dressing that you use it
smart.
quite frequently. So that's kind of the audience, and we had to make it palatable, or you're going to a very, very niche market.
Love that. My first introduction to hot sauce, yeah, I come from the UK originally. We live in North Carolina, US now, but Britain isn't stereotypically a place of spicy, exotic foods, even though we have a lot of a lot of history in the spice world. Our palate is pretty plain, and some people would say boring. And when I was in the British Army, and we were on tour in Afghanistan, and we have ration packs that would come in, and the food in general isn't fantastic in ration packs, but that's
Sure.
not what you
Yeah.
join up for, right? But they would give you this little tiny bottle of Tabasco sauce. It's like a 2 or 3 drop bottle,
Yep.
and even though the food tastes of nothing, it was spicy, so that's some element of something's going on with the food, and I loved it because at least it tasted of something. Spice, I'll take the heat rather than any flavor. But
Awesome.
then as I came here, I look at the shelves and it's suddenly like, oh gosh, like this is a whole culture. This is a really cool area of the market. And I've learned to really enjoy the flavor addition. But I love the idea that you have of this kind of moving it down into enhancing the food rather than being a kind of a gimmick or yeah, I'm going to put this on a little something just to have a little kick and have a play with it. Instead, this becomes a main part of my ingredient or the recipe. So
Right.
really, really smart.
Exactly. Yeah, you can cook with it. You can, if you're doing any type of chicken, or we have folks who use it on enchiladas over the top, very, smart using in the Hispanic food, world. But yeah, you should be able to do these other things with it as a cooking sauce, to enhance it, to, really instill those flavors. And don't get me wrong, you're absolutely right. There's times where you need to just kind of mask or bring up and bring into flavor of certain things. But I think doing the hot sauce, you kind of have other angles on it as well. So
Love it. Well, our next question here, we can jump to this one, which is
yeah.
what are some of the biggest challenges or roadblocks that entrepreneurs, people bringing products to the market face when it comes to packaging, branding, and getting their product out there into the market? And how might our listeners overcome those?
Oh man, this is a great question, because yeah, we've hit it a million different ways. So the most simplest one, if we're thinking, well, a lot of folks are in e-commerce worlds, right? One of the first hurdles and struggles I think we got into was shipping. How do I, protect something, my product, and ours comes in glass bottles, during shipping, and packaging had to come into that. And after that, again, going through the consumer experience, like from what we talked about earlier, when they open that box, how do we want them to see that? How would we want them to experience that? Um, Unwrapping and unboxing, right? We have it on the outside. It's like, cool, we want to get it on the inside. So um, that was a challenge. But in any of these questions, I kind of have a process where I walk through the consumer from,
Hmm.
I'm a consumer on other things. What do I expect? And then, looking at what some of those brands have done, and then doing it out of survival, mimicking.
Yep.
That's a lot of learn by experience. We all order stuff from, various brands, whether it's Amazon, Target, Walmart, all of our big brands, to supporting, local creators and them packaging their own. And so it was an evaluation as a consumer, and then a lot of mimicking. And then I figured it out from a survival standpoint, we could take it a little bit further, and I can get into some of those stories. But the roadblocks after that, there was extreme challenges in scaling and how do we go out about doing this. And in
Yep.
our own case, in that mimicking, the best way I found was, like, we ended up using a macaron box, and we did it from a survival standpoint of repurposing, and
Nice.
said, okay, those are widely available. we're very cost conscious as we're a new brand up and coming, but we needed to build this sampler. So we said, okay, what can we use? And so a lot of research into boxes, and maybe it didn't fit and check all the boxes as a custom branded package, but it was something real early on in our journey that was readily available, that was, cost conscious. And it just took a little bit more power from our side into manipulating the box the way we wanted it, with the addition of labels and some things on the inside to make it look custom. But that was kind of our early journey in survival. So, the roadblock, again, is tremendous because of scaling, and you have MOQs when you get into the big places, and like, hey, you have to buy 10,000 boxes, and then you have to learn about layouts and die cuts and all these different things, and it's just hugely overwhelming when you're like, hey, my example, I'm here to sell some hot sauce. And so again, taking that back to kind of summarize into, look at as a consumer out there, what other folks are doing, and then try to replicate it for what you're doing in your brand and understand where you're at in your journey and scaling process. And again, for us, it was, mimicking, finding something readily available that I can get on Amazon, get here in a day or two, manipulate the product, build some labels, and kind of make our own. And then, slowly grow from there, and then look into, okay, can I do my own? And got a kind of interesting story there if you want to. I can kind of touch on
let's go for it. Hit us up.
Yeah, so we kind of scale once we kind of solve that sampler, in the packaging world. I was like, okay, we can
just quickly, Jared, where's that sampler going out to? Potential retail stores? Who was that going to?
Yeah, so we have retail store that we're a part of here locally that goes up on our website. It goes with us on farmers markets, so it's got to sit out, on our counter when we go out to markets, and we sit out there and talk to folks and do samples for a while. But yeah, it has a standalone in its own store shelf, goes out to markets, and then of course e-commerce. We sell online and then through social media as well. We had the next iteration and roadblock for our business is we had an opportunity for a corporate account reached out to us and said, hey, we want to kind of do our own white labeling. And I said, oh, okay. Not something I expected early on, but they said, hey, we're going to buy, a number of bottles from you. And hot sauce ended up, as I went on this journey with them, was part of their culture. So they said, okay, we want our own packaging and we want our own design. I was like, oh, okay. I can't really just reuse my macaron box anymore. That's not going to work for these guys, because they have their own brand, and it's they wanted it branded for their company. It's like, okay. And so that one I ended up, and there's a lot of great resources online. Ended up doing some research into CAD, found a software, I think it's called PackMage or Package Mage CAD, and said, okay, they have some templates. I think there's a small cost for the license. And you're moving lines around. And it's like, okay, I can kind of see how this package unfolds on the screen. And I was familiar with some of the file types, doing laser cutting in the past, and I found out, okay, I can template my own. So I started literally cutting on manila envelopes. That's all I had at the time. And, I had a laser cutter. The relatively desktop ones are relatively inexpensive these days. And I started cutting my own packaging. It understood it took the DXF file, and it's like, okay, I can shove that up there after I do that. I had my bottles for the hot sauce for with this corporate account, and I can kind of do some templating. And so went through several dozen iterations of these manila envelopes and cardboard and testing different things. And, finally got something together that, came together pretty nicely with a little bit of glue, and said, okay, I could do this. And then, I found a paper store who could actually get, I took in a package of another box that I liked. And I said, I don't know a lot about paper. You guys are a paper store. And they actually have the tools where they can tell you the pound or weight of that paper of this example. So going all the way back to the tools I learned early on of mimicking, said, do you have paper in this quantity or weight? So that way I can move from my manila envelopes to what this is. Yep. And they said, absolutely. And they sold me a nice box of, 50, 60 sheets of that I could then insert on my laser cutter and run the file. And it was, exactly the same weight, feel, texture as someone else already out in the industry, a major big brand, because I like their boxes. And you could do it at home, relatively inexpensive. So it's just kind of a journey of grinding, learning. There's a bunch of resources and tools out there for you to do at-home prototyping. Technology
Yeah.
has come a long way. So I would encourage folks to go out and do that because it worked out great. I could design a couple labels, slap them on those boxes, and the corporate account was extremely happy because they got to customize it. It gave us
Yeah.
a huge amount of flexibility just learning those things. And then, it took a week or so to learn the CAD software. But it was the kind of right next growth opportunity for me to understand how to actually build our own packaging from scratch, from end to end, from something, again, that was just a
Yeah.
piece of paper to a box.
That's
So
amazing. I think you need to give yourself a lot of credit because not many founders or entrepreneurs, even though they're thinking entrepreneurially, don't get to that stage where they're like, I want to fix the problem and then figure out how to fix the problem. If it's a new piece of software, learn the software, laser cutter, get a laser cutter, need the paper, go to a store. I mean, all of that is like, I love that level of just ingenuity and kind of the digging in to find the answers. That's got to set you in a good stead moving forward. That's really exciting.
yeah, thanks. Yeah. And
Yeah.
again, I saw a customer problem from my customers and I didn't know how to solve it quickly. And, like anything else, internet's a great resource, and just like you said, started digging in and finding the end-to-end process, and found a route after a couple of days of research. Hey, I can do this. So if you're
Nice.
willing to jump in the space and to start your own business, you can do all these things as well, right?
Just knocking problems down.
Exactly. That's what we're all built to do in this entrepreneurial space. So
Love it. Well, the last question here is it's our chance to get out that crystal ball, put our forecast hat on here and look at like what do you see as the future of packaging, as the future of these kind of product brand experiences, and how might they evolve over the next 5 to 10 years? And what could our listeners be doing today to stay ahead of the curve?
yeah, and I'm really going to lean on Rick and Doug here because I'm going to cheat from their episode because they hit it out of the park on this, right? They talked about the AR, the interactivity and sustainability and all these things that are going in, and I 100% agree with them of where that's going. And I'll start with a couple of stories as a consumer myself, and then kind of turn that into where I think it goes for at least the consumer product goods in the food space, right? Really a low bar one with we as a family we use HelloFresh packaged meals, again something that started since
Yeah.
COVID, and we've gone on and off with the program, but they do something, they have their own unique problems with shipping meals all over the country. Here in Arizona it is very hot right now,
Yeah.
so they have a unique packaging solution of how they keep things cold and fresh. But they did something interesting. They partnered with other brands, and basically, you have a little surprise sometimes. Today, literally, we opened our box. We have some chocolate in there, and it's an advertisement, but we have a full
Nice.
chocolate bar. But that little surprise, knowing that's in there or could or couldn't be, is really fun. The kids come, we say, okay, let's see if we got something today. Let's
Yeah.
see, is it an energy drink? Is it something else? Is it a chocolate bar? All these different things they partner with other brands, but it's a little surprise we're not expecting as a consumer. We didn't
Yeah.
order it, it wasn't there. Um, so I think that's one is what I'm learning from that is, do little things with your products and your packaging, right? Think about those experiences of customers opening and getting this thing they didn't expect. That's going to put a smile on their face, and the smile on their face is right in front of your brand, and they're going to remember that.
So good.
Um, yeah. And then the other one more recently, Nike and sustainability. Something that really surprised me, got some new shoes from Nike. They came in. We all have the shoe boxes. We repurpose shoe boxes, I think, well as
Yeah.
everybody does. They have a shoe box of coins, cables, whatever it is in their closets. But they had a perforated section down the middle. And I was like, oh. And I was looking out from the outside. I opened it up, and they have reprinted on the box some instructions of how to tear it away. And it kind of folds up into this pod or pencil holder of reusing their cardboard.
Nice.
So not only do you not have to recycle it, you got a cool thing. Again, something interactive, fun that I could hand to the kids and say,
Yeah.
hey, this is cool. Look at this. And then, a couple three-step instructions of just a little tab system they had with the
Yeah.
cardboard. So no other tools or pieces. Has nothing to do with shoes or athletic clothing that Nike has, but it was something memorable that
Yeah.
stood apart from other brands. And it brought that interactivity. So not just open the box, take the shoes out, box goes in recycling. We've spent more time with it, taking it apart, putting it together, talking about, right? And it just keeps you more interactive with that brand. So I think transitioning that into the food world is that's going to continue. How do I make this interactive? How do I make folks, after the hot sauce, learn more about it? Do I do recipes? and attach some recipes to my food brand through a QR code and interactivity. I think, there's another internet personality, Uncle Roger. He has a whole little meal kit, and it has little tearaway sections, kind of, a TV dinner style sectioned out, but they have instructions, put this here. And it's kind of this halfway between a meal kit and shelf stable, but they have more about the brand, and it's more interactive, and it's all right there in their packaging. And so I think that's going to continue in the next 5 to 10 years to keep people engaged, right? We talk about it with social media, we talk about it with everything else. So how, when they actually consume my product, how do they stay engaged? So I think 5, 10 years, that's where it's going to be. And there's just a variety of tools to take us there.
So good. Yeah. Keeping them engaged, retaining that attention, moving that brand into the house, and then being able to keep that kind of sense of excitement around the brand, so that every time it comes in, there's this little dopamine hit that happens.
Exactly. Yep.
It's fun, and that's something that product should be. It can be fun, even in sort of areas of the market that typically aren't that fun. Even in history, there's been times where bags of flour suddenly started to have children designs for clothing that mothers could cut up and could do that during the Great Depression. And there's loads of these of kind of other examples of this happening. And I think that if you're an entrepreneur listening to this, just do a little Google, do a little bit of research, and you'll find some really fun ideas out there that you can do. And I think that we've gone through this whole conversation, Jared, and it's been so refreshing to have an entrepreneur on the side of this conversation who is actively doing it, it's live for them, it's happening there, and it's current learning, not something that somebody who was a founder but actually started the business 7 years ago, before the pandemic and before a lot of things changed. So that's been really exciting. If someone was interested in buying some of the product, Jared, and getting some of that source, and just wanted to follow you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, best way to reach out to us, we're known as Salce, so you can find us at getsalce.com or get Salce on any social media platform, whether that's Instagram, TikTok, or Facebook.
Perfect. We'll put the links into the show notes as well. So if you're listening, hit the description and show notes, and you'll be able to click and go off to that. But that is it for today's episode of Unboxed. Thank you so much to our guest, Jared, here, for sharing all the insights and the expertise they have with us. If you've enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe to the podcast or video if you're on YouTube. Leave us a review. Wherever you're listening to this, it means a lot to us and all the algorithm robot overlords. And if you have any questions, concerns, suggestions, or you'd like to be a guest for future episodes, you can reach us on hello@merchantboxes.com. Until next time, keep thinking outside the box and creating unforgettable brand experiences. Bye. Thank you for listening to today's episode. It was sponsored by Merchant Boxes. Merchant Boxes provide custom packaging to large businesses and small creators that customers love. If you're looking for award-winning custom package designs that make your business and products stand out from the competition, click the link in the show notes to find out more.